Kathy Flett. I'm an Alberta girl, born and raised in northern Alberta by trade, is what I like to say. I grew up in the Peace River area, and most of my adult life was spent on the other side of the Muskeg in Fort McMurray. So when I came down to Sherwood Park 14 or 15 years ago, I like to joke and say I've been in a bit of a cultural crisis ever since. When you go from rural to urban, there really is a difference. But, we make plans, and God laughs and puts you where He wants you to be. And so here we are, and it's worked out. It's worked out wonderfully. And now I've got this opportunity to literally travel the province talking about what I love, which is Alberta and the people that are in it. And I got my first start in this movement 6 years ago, actually, with the whole Wexit thing. Some of you might remember that. And from there, I landed in the Freedom Conservative Party, which then became the Wild Rose Independence Party, which then kind of blew up, and then I was a bit homeless and wasn't sure what to do. And a friend of mine who had been with me through part of that journey, we got to be very, very close friends. Her name is Angela Tabak. Last March, end of March, we were sitting here going, well, like, now what? Now what? There's some of the old names were coming back up, and the independence movement was picking back up again, and the interest was there again. And we said, but yeah, that political stuff, it sucks. Like, that's a pig pen. I don't know if we really want to get into that. And the more we talked about it and the more we prayed about it, this idea came up, you know what, we need to go and chat with the ladies. Because whether we like it or not, there's not enough of us women yet ready, convinced that this is a good idea in order to pass that referendum. So we came up with this plan and this idea to just go into women's homes and just have coffee, tea, wine, whatever you want to serve, and chat about this. And it's working. We've been traveling the province and doing exactly that. The other thing that we found out is that the guys kind of like this message too. Even though it's very different from what you would typically hear in a meeting like this, it intrigued the men as well. So we're like, well, all right, let's open it right up and let's go. So this is what we've been doing. And then APP got a hold of the message, and they said, well, hey, we want you to come talk at our stuff too. And now I'm just like 100 times blessed because I get to share it in a bigger setting as well. So without further ado, what we do is walk you guys through kind of the history. To figure out how we got to where we are today, it's really important to look at the past and to just really paint a nice, clean picture. If I can get my mouse to work. Come on. There we go. The people of the Northwest are allowed but a degree more control of their affairs than the serfs of Siberia. Do you guys know the Oliver section of Edmonton? Right? So that's named after Frank Oliver. He was the publisher of Edmonton's first newspaper, and he said this in 1885. We weren't even a province yet. And the reason that he said the Northwest is because we were a district of the province of the Northwest Territories, ourselves in Saskatchewan. The map looked very different back then than what we know it to look like today. We desire, every patriotic Canadian desires that the great trade of the prairie shall go to enrich our own people in the East, to build up the factories and the workshops of Eastern Canada, and contribute in every way to its prosperity. This was said in 1904 by Sir Clifford Sifton. That's where Elbows Up began. So what happened? Well, at the time, we were being advertised as the last best West. People came from everywhere, from Europe, but predominantly from the US, to come here. They were told, this is the land of milk and honey. You come here, we're going to give you a chunk of land. You've got some time to get it figured out. You build a homestead, grow some things, have a family. It's going to be great. Escape from wherever you're coming and come here. They didn't tell anybody about the weather. They just told them to come. And so come they did. But it didn't take very long before these folks who were ready to roll up their sleeves and make a new life realized it is really, really hard to get things done when your local politicians are hundreds and thousands of miles away and we don't have email and text yet. Right? So they were getting frustrated. They wanted to do something, but they couldn't because it was really, really tough. And they got together and said, you know what, we need some autonomy. We need some autonomy around here so that we can do exactly what we want to do. And we need some local representation. So they threw some ideas down at the table. And then they called in Premier Haultain, who was the dude at the time that they needed to talk to, who was actually a really good premier. And they said, you know what? What if we created the province of Buffalo? So you remember in 2019, there was 4 MPs, conservative MPs, who came up with the Buffalo Declaration, and that all went out, and then they were all unceremoniously backbenched for having the audacity to stand up for our province. This is the genesis of that. Let's create the province of Buffalo. Great idea. Haultain, of course, thought it was outstanding, and so he took that to Ottawa, where all great ideas go to die. And they said, no, absolutely not. That is not going to happen, because if we do that, this is the first big boom, and if their population gets bigger than our population, the balance of power is going to move to the west, and we cannot have that. That is an absolute no-no. So they took a pencil, a ruler, and an eraser, and they redrew all the lines, created Alberta and Saskatchewan, and we were legitimately colonized. Anybody who tells you, well, Alberta, suck it up, this is what you negotiated? No, we didn't. We were told. We were told. When the Dominion of Canada first began, it was Ontario and Quebec, with Manitoba and New Brunswick as bookends. Manitoba and New Brunswick both got to negotiate their way in. Manitoba not so much as New Brunswick, to be fair, because Ottawa was still a little miffed at the whole Louis Riel thing, but there was still some chat. Then the rest of the maritime provinces, with the exception of Newfoundland, also negotiated their way in. BC negotiated their way in. Remember, the US was trying to come up because they wanted to connect with Alaska. They had Alaska, so they wanted to take that whole coastal area, and Ottawa said, oh, no, you don't, we're taking British Columbia. So that's what they did. Newfoundland was actually the last ones to come in. In 1950, they were complete holdouts. Alberta and Saskatchewan were told, the Act, Alberta Act of 1905, Saskatchewan Act of 1905, and here we are today. We didn't have our own premier, we didn't even have a legislature, we had no representation whatsoever. That would come in the next following years. So now today, if we fast forward, this is what our Senate seats look like. We've got 2 houses, right, in the House of Commons. We've got the Senate, and we've got the House of Commons, or sorry, in Parliament. We've got the Senate, and we've got the House of Commons. Here's what our map looks like today, a little bit different from the one that I showed you there, from 1904. You can see these are the Senate seats, all allotted to the various provinces. So the Western provinces each have 6. Ontario, Quebec each have 24, and then you see 10, 10, 4, and 6 for the maritime provinces. When you look at these numbers, what do you notice? That's what I thought. Seats in the Senate. Now seats in the House of Commons. Let's see that. So if we go from west to east, 43, 37, 14, 14, 122, 78, and then we've got the maritime provinces coming in at 7, 4, 10, and 11. What do you notice? A little lopsided, isn't it? It's also kind of weird that the Senate seats and the MP seats, those numbers are very similar, if not the same. I'm going to explain that to you in a second. But Kathy, it's representation by population. Too bad. It just, y'all are going to have more babies or something. This is what we hear, right? All right, let's find out. Let's just see about that. If we look at Prince Edward Island, just under 45,000 people per senator. Newfoundland, just under 91,000 people per senator. Quebec, 377,000 people per senator. Manitoba, 229,000. Alberta, per senator. For those in the back that forgot their glasses like I did, that's 814,787. Okay, well, that's the Senate. So let's maybe see it's better in Commons. PEI, same number. Just under 45,000. Newfoundland, just about 78,000. Quebec, 116,000. Manitoba, 106. Alberta, 132,000. Is that representation by population? No, obviously. Ottawa thinks so. So now to explain why these numbers in the east, in the maritime provinces, are as close as they are. Some decades ago, Parliament decided it would be a great idea to bring in a senatorial clause, which meant that you could never have fewer MPs than you do senators. And that was also the time when they locked in the Senate seats and said, this is how many you will always have. It doesn't matter what your population does, this is what you'll always have. So that's why Prince Edward Island has 4 MPs and 4 senators, because that number 4 was locked in, so they can never have fewer than 4 MPs. They could have 8 people on that island, and as long as they're all Canadian citizens over the age of 18, 4 of them can be MPs and 4 of them can be senators. That's how it's written. That's the legislation. Those numbers don't change. The only ones that do change are the seats in the House of Commons, the MPs that we vote in. These senators are also not elected. Now, Alberta tries, but whoever the Prime Minister is merely takes that as a suggestion, right? So these are all appointed seats. Most of them, with the exception of very few, were all appointed by a Liberal government, by Trudeau. So when people got all excited that maybe we would actually get a federal Conservative government again, do you really think anything would have happened? No, because every law has to go through both houses. They're not going to pass through the Senate. So it would not have mattered. The system is not broken. It's working exactly as it's designed. So let's fix it and make it fair, because, you know, Canadians are really nice people, and so surely everybody is going to want to make this right. I hear this all the time. So let's open up the Constitution, because we know that everybody's going to want to work with us. Okay. So to open up the Constitution, we need 7 premiers and 50% of the population. So when we look at this map, what 7 premiers are going to agree with us that we need to open up the Constitution and make some serious changes around here, not the least of which is get rid of that equalization formula? Won't happen, will it? Won't happen. Something that people don't often consider is that if we did get 7 premiers and 50% of the population to agree to open up the Constitution, renegotiate things, and hopefully come out with a better deal, at this point we don't have the numbers, and what happens if they make it worse? That could happen. So this is really not a risk that we want to take. It's not a risk that I want to take. We're also not only lopsided in our politics, we are lopsided in our values. Canada's attack on religious charities makes no fiscal sense. I tend to agree with that. Supreme Court made take away the mandatory minimum sentences for pedophiles. When you stop protecting the children, it's over. It's over. And that's what's happening. More than half of Canadians no longer feel safe in their neighborhoods. Well, I wonder why that is. Number of non-Canadian federal inmates continue to rise. Why are we putting them in prison? If they're non-Canadian and they broke our laws, give them a boat and a paddle and tell them to figure it out. Why are we feeding them? Nearly half of Canadians report that rising prices are greatly impacting their ability to meet day-to-day expenses. Well, when we've got inflation to the tune that we do now, and the taxes are over half of what we get to make, of course we can't afford things. That's not our fault. That's Ottawa's fault. We are in a politically induced recession that is actually a depression. They just don't want you to know that, so they fudge the numbers. That's what happens here. $78 billion deficit per public service cuts, new tax measures. That was all in the budget. I don't really care about the public service cuts, that's fine. But everything else. $1.3 trillion in debt. People say, oh, well, Kathy, if you leave, you're going to have to take a portion of the debt. We did not vote any of this in. No, we're not. No, we're not. Our portion of that, each, is just under $31,000. Each. Every man, woman, and child. That's ridiculous. No way. But wait, there's more. Ostrich? Cull? Anybody following that? Find it interesting that the government of Canada felt it important that they underline the fact that it was a humane call. And it was responsible to disposal of the bodies. If you had to underline that and say that, that's like somebody saying, oh, I'm so humble. And it's like, no, you're not, or you wouldn't have had to say it. It's the same thing. But they don't stop there. They're also coming for the cattle. And then, of course, if they can't kill the cattle, they'll just tax their farts, because that's a great idea. New report warns the WHO health rules erode Canada's democracy and charter rights. Well, our federal government was doing a great job of that anyways, but here we are. Oh, I don't know how that happened. Oh, it fell off the thing. And then, of course, we've got a government that wants to shut us down. I don't know why that happened either. They want to shut us down. For what? When you take out the numbers, Alberta's greenhouse gas emissions that we're supposed to feel so guilty for are literally 0.5% of the whole entire globe. They want to shut us down for that. That hardly makes sense at all. Our values are misaligned. They're completely misaligned. And it's the federal government that's doing this. Now, people get angry about East versus West and whatever else not. I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the government, the system. It's no good. The Westminster system doesn't work for us. It's time to start to dream a little bit and to make things better for ourselves, and we can. There's no reason that we can't. And I get a little bit challenged when people say, oh, well, what about healthcare? Well, what about it? We're paying for it already through all of our taxes. At least now we'll finally be in control of it and keep all those extra royalty fees that we've been sending to Ottawa to be able to fund healthcare. Do you know that there's procedures going on around the world that would completely benefit Albertans, but we can't do it here because we have a federal government who says no? And I know that for a fact because I lived it. With my own son who had back problems, it turned out he had a herniated disc. He was going to have to wait at least 2 years before he could see a specialist, and then it was going to be who knows how long after that before he could have surgery. Poor kid was 20 years old and couldn't even bend over to tie his shoes anymore. Go and see a different doctor who says, would you like to take him to Tampa? I said, yep. And away we went. And he got to have back surgery that is not allowed here, and he not only did not come out of that surgical ward in a wheelchair, he walked out. And we can't do that here because we have a federal government who won't let us. Why? What's up with being such a control freak? Or our education. What about our education? What about it? We could actually have some fun in our schools with our kids without them thinking they need a litter box in the corner because some kid is identifying as a cat. That happened in Sherwood Park. That is a true story. That happened. There's some other things that we could do too. Our own police force, we can do that anyways. But we could really step that up a notch. And then I usually get, well, but Kathy, what about the military? What are we going to do? These are all the fears that come up. What are we going to do about the military? Like, what are we going to do about the military? Have you been to rural Alberta? I don't think we need to worry too much. But nevertheless, we could have open houses. We could have open houses and just invite people to come, and we could maybe strategically have those open houses by some of these military bases. And then the men and women in uniform maybe will come in plain clothes to hear what we have to say. And as they hear our stories and as they hear what's actually going on, and maybe they're going to want to be a part of that. And we can say, hey, you know what? How about if you come and you defend our new country of Alberta, and we'll actually pay you what you're worth. We'll make sure you have shoes on your feet and food when we send you overseas for wars that you should be fighting, not ones that you should not. And we'll make sure you have sleeping bags while you're there. And for fun, we'll even take out the tampons from the men's bathroom. I think they'll badge over. I think they'll badge over. Then we have some other things that people will say, well, what about trade value? What about trade issues? What are we going to do with that? Our largest trading partner is south of us. I'm not worried about being landlocked. If we never put one more barrel of oil in a pipeline, we would be fine. I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just saying we're fine. We're just fine. But then on the topic of landlocked, people will come to me with that too, talking about misaligned. Who landlocked us? Ottawa. Ottawa landlocked us, our own government, and now with BC's help, absolutely. They did that to us. So, Alberta becomes our own country, we've got our own borders, we've got our own security. There's $1 trillion port in Vancouver that ships stuff right through Alberta to go to the rest of Canada. Could tariff it, or it could just make it miserable and say, well, we know that less than 1% of all of that stuff that comes through that port is even looked at. We want to see what's in those containers before you bring them into our borders. Suddenly we're not landlocked anymore. Oh yeah, maybe we should let you have a pipeline to the west and make sure we're getting along better. Yeah, maybe we should. Now, given some of the land problems that BC is having, we might have to sort that out. There's a bit of a cog in that wheel, but we'll get it done. The thing of it is, this is a political problem. It requires a political solution. It's also a values problem. And that matters. Because as Albertans, it's time that we stand together and stand up for what means the most to us, which is our faith, which is our family, and which is our freedom. So let's make sure we continue to get this message out and help people understand that it can't be fixed. There's only one way forward, and that's that referendum on independence. Thank you.
I know you're going to be motivated to join him in fighting for Alberta's survival, our future, and our prosperity after you hear him this evening. Please welcome Chris Scott. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and thank you.
Sorry.
Well, what a wonderful evening in Tofield. This is my second time speaking for the Alberta Prosperity Project in this room, and this time the crowd is bigger. Do you know why? Do you know why the crowd's bigger today?
Because we need more people.
Well, more people, very good.
It's math.
The crowd is bigger because the federal government in this country has become the best salesperson for Alberta independence that this province has ever seen. Now I gotta ask, how many people in this room are new? How many are attending their first Alberta Prosperity Project meeting tonight? Look around, folks. Now here's a more delicate question. How many people in this room are still not on board with the idea of an independent Alberta? Okay, so there's a few. So generally, I speak on all sorts of different topics. Lots of times I'll talk about some of the things Kathy mentioned, like our position within Confederation, the rationale behind independence, why we need to do something, why we can't change the Constitution, those types of things. Lately, and this is very encouraging, by the time the first speaker is done, there's only maybe 2 or 3 hands that go up that are still unsure. And there was probably 4 tonight, so I'm going to ask you, for those people who are still unsure, please come and see me after, and I'll take time and I'll talk with you one-on-one about whatever you're concerned about specifically. For the rest of you, I want to talk about not so much the rationale behind independence, but the reason why now is the time to do something that we've never done before. I want to get across to you that we have not only a duty, but a moral obligation to fix the problems we're experiencing today. Now, we see these problems all the time manifest in different things. A lot of times it's an economic problem. Sometimes it's a logistical thing, like we can't move our resources. Sometimes the federal government they're passing laws that just blatantly do not align with our values as Albertans. So there's a very wide range of things. Right now in Alberta, we're experiencing some internal turmoil simply because our government has listened to us and they've said, of all the basic things we can do, we want to protect children from predators. And that, for some reason, is a contentious issue. So the buffet of problems it's massive. And I want to argue that it's more important to identify solutions than focus on all of the individual problems. Mm-hmm. So considering the plethora of problems we have, it's extremely important that we identify the solution. And I say the solution rests with the idea that as individuals and as a province, we need to reclaim our sovereignty. We need to be able to chart our own course forward. We need to be able to make the decisions and pass the laws that affect us and our children and our children's children. Would that be a fair assessment? Yeah. And that's really what it means to live in a democracy, right? The people at large decide how they're going to be governed, how the government's going to act, those types of things. It's up to us. It's not like we're supposed to be living in a country where there's top down and they just tell us what rights we can have. But I'll tell you from experience, that is how we're living right now. Kathy mentioned the situation at Universal Ostrich Farms. They didn't decide that that's what they wanted to do. The BC poultry producers sure as hell didn't decide when one chicken sneezes, we're going to kill 100,000. Since they brought in that policy 8 years ago, or 6 years ago, 8.5 million birds have been euthanized because they were either sick or on the suspicion of illness. That's not a policy we came up with. Yet, we're governed by it. I didn't specifically vote for a policy that says if a person sneezes, we're going to shut down the entire province, destroy businesses, destroy individual relationships, destroy families. I never said I wanted that. And yet, that's what we experienced. That's what actually was the kick in my butt to get me involved and stop being lazy watching TV while the world went in a handbasket around me. So we have two choices. We can either continue along that same path under the same structure and the same laws, unable to change those laws because, let's face it, as Albertans, do you really feel like you have representation in the place that makes our federal law? No. I mean, you need not look farther back than this spring to see what Alberta's place, what Alberta's position in this relationship is. It's not, our position isn't elbows up, it's, well, you can use your imaginations. So we have to change these things. And I've been watching people, like politically motivated people, spinning their wheels for 5 years, saying, well, we just need to get rid of Jason Kenney. We just need to elect Danielle Smith. We just need to elect Pierre Poilievre. We just need to get rid of Justin Trudeau. We just need to do these things. And all the time I'm thinking, none of these things are going to solve the problems. They'll solve the immediate issues we're facing, maybe, for a period of time, maybe, but overall, it's not going to do anything to fix what allowed these things to happen in the first place. So as an Albertan, you know that we could vote 100% across this province, except for two little contentious areas in Calgary and Edmonton. We could vote for a Conservative government that is more aligned with our ideals than not. And I will say, personally, currently, they're not very aligned with me at all, but they're more aligned with me than the Liberals are. And that should say that Alberta has spoken. We're going to send our representatives to Parliament. They're going to speak on our behalf, and we're going to be represented. Well, that has never happened. Not in 118 years. 117 years. It hasn't happened. And there's people out there that'll say, well, it's just broken, Chris. We just need to fix it. We just need to fix this country. It's not broken. Kathy explained that very well. And I'm gonna second that. The problems we're experiencing as Albertans are by design. This country is structured the way it is to keep the balance of power in Central and Eastern Canada. Period. There is no way by which we can change that. So no matter what we do to fix the individual little problems from time to time for a period of time, no matter what we do, we can't change that. Now, I have heard people say, well, we can just open the Constitution and change it. The last thing I want right now, after reading parts of that book, Values, is to have our federal government anywhere near our Constitution. Do you know the things that he mentions in that book? He mentions that you, the ordinary people, have to be uncomfortable. You're going to have to give up some comforts. You're going to have to give up some things so that we can survive. And the things he's saying you have to give up, it's not like, oh, you're going to have to give up maybe a trip to Florida every year. No, you have to give up meat. And you have to give up heat and driving and individual liberties, specifically individual liberties. Those are the types of things that our Prime Minister are saying you folks and me need to give up for us to survive. Well, I'm not buying it, not even a little bit. So when I start hearing rumblings about the federal government saying things like, well, you know, we want to look at the Constitution, and we want to maybe get rid of this pesky notwithstanding clause so the provinces have to do what we say. Mm-hmm. That is very concerning to me. And that idea of opening and changing the Constitution to fix the imbalance that we experience in this country, that idea is long gone. Long gone. If that Constitution gets opened, it is not going to be beneficial to us. It will be much worse. There's two major points of contention they have right now. The notwithstanding clause and the Clarity Act. The idea that a province can actually, through a democratic means, leave Confederation and stand on their own. Those are the two things that our federal government is really concerned about right now. And if you peel that onion back a little bit, what they're really concerned about is that you folks may be able to influence the outcomes of your own future. They do not want that. The cat was out of the bag in 1905 or 1904 when Clifford Sifton delivered that speech in Manitoba. Contribute to its prosperity, not to yours. That's evident from the time we were created as a province until today. Farmers, some of you in this room, you lived through a period of time where it was illegal to sell your wheat to anybody but the wheat pool. Some of you really old folks, there's a couple, you experienced a time where you couldn't buy equipment from anywhere but the East. Like, these are real things that happened in this country. I was jailed for protesting in Canada. I have assembled for political purpose with my friends and my neighbors in secret, because if we had been caught, we would have been arrested for assembling for political purpose. I've attended illegal church services in Canada. I have watched our politicians sacrificing our children in the name of progressivism. And it's still happening to this day. Mm-hmm. The things that I've experienced and the things that I've seen in this country that used to be the freest and most prosperous place on the planet, where everybody in the world wanted to go, where people would sell everything they had in their home country just to get here for opportunity. I've watched it go from that to a place where people are fleeing, and in some cases, perishing in their journey to escape this country. What have we become? What has happened to this country? It's despicable. So when I talk about duty and a moral obligation, I'm not talking about we have a duty to pay less taxes. I'm not talking about we have a duty to, make sure that we're not sending $27 billion extra to Ottawa for which we don't get a penny back. I'm not talking about those things. Those things are all important for our prosperity. But I'm talking about something deeper. I'm talking about the ability of human beings with values and morals to be able to pursue those values according to their morals and their beliefs. This country was founded on Christian principles, period. It was Christian principles that built the West, that built the freest places on the planet. Because at the heart of that matter, I believe as a Christian, that my rights did not come from Ottawa. They came from God. He gave them to me, and it's my duty to protect them. Now, you may not be a believer. You may be completely opposed to the idea of Christianity. That doesn't change the fact that that is what built the West. That is what laid the foundation and the groundwork for the freedom and prosperity we enjoyed for decades. It was that. The United States, people say, the United States was created as a secular nation. No, it wasn't. The United States has literally declarations of faith in most of the state constitutions. The Founding Fathers said that the United States would not work unless it was a Christian nation, because it relied on the morality of people based on something greater than themselves to get along and be peaceful and free. And our country has turned their back on that, 100%. Alberta, not so much. Alberta, not so much. You might not be a believer, but I think Alberta still has a different moral standard than maybe other parts of the country. That's apparent almost everywhere you go here. And that's why it is so important that we do everything we can to preserve the ability to live by those values. There is nothing more important. Think about what our kids are going to inherit from us. I think about this all the time. My girls are 22 and 23, I think. 21 and 22. I'm old. My son just turned 16. And I think in the 40 years of my conscious awareness of my life, I'm 46, I think about how much things have changed from what I remember as a kid to now. How much even the way people interact with each other or the way the government talks has changed. It's unrecognizable. And if it's done that in 40 years, what's it going to be like in another 20 years? What's it going to be like in this country when we pass through 2030? Because there's a lot of things that are planned for 2030. What's it going to be like when we approach 2050, when our kids are roughly my age? It is not going to be the Canada that we knew. This country is in a state of managed decline. The globalists have told us, point blank, they want to build back better, which means they have to destroy first. Our politicians are putting on smiling faces, and they're cherry-picking little metrics about our GDP or whatever, and saying, oh, we're on the rise, we're doing so great, but if you dig a little bit deeper, the trajectory is straight down. It's straight down. And I'll tell you, when people fail to act, when they know those things are happening, when you don't do your duty as a human being to stop these things, do you know what you see? You see societal collapses. Higher taxes, whatever. We've had high taxes forever. I'm talking about something much deeper than that. I worked in Colombia for a couple years. And on my way to work, I had a 3-hour drive from the regional airport that I had to fly into. And I remember seeing hundreds, maybe thousands of people walking along the side of the highway with bags and suitcases and all sorts of things. Families. And I asked my assistant, what is this? Why are these people walking? They were walking from Venezuela through South America to whatever country they just happened to stop in. Do you know why they were walking from Venezuela? Because Venezuela let their country decline into such a state that they couldn't even exist there anymore. When I was in Colombia, I was in Bogota, and they had a protest. There was a protest at the legislature there, the government building. You know who was protesting? Prostitutes. They were protesting, and prostitution's illegal down there. They were protesting because the people in Venezuela, the only thing that some of them had left to support their families was the oldest profession. And they flooded the market and reduced the price. So even though it was illegal, these women were protesting that this was happening. And think about that. What does that tell you of how bad it must have been that families, learned people, doctors, lawyers, were resulting to that to support their families? That's a very extreme case. But I use it because those images will never be out of my brain. I'll never forget pulling onto the Lease Road that morning and seeing parts of the jungle were cleared and there was tarps and tents and stuff. And I asked what's going on. They said, well, the Venezuelans have arrived. They set up wherever and then they'll move on maybe or maybe not. And that was terrible enough. The next day, maybe a couple days later, I'm on my way to work and I see young girls sitting in chairs along the Lease Road waiting for men to pay them for sex so they can support their families. And that's a very extreme example. But I say this because I want you to understand that at some point, those people in that situation, they had a choice to make. They had a choice whether or not they were going to do their duty, and in Venezuela it would have been a lot harder, I'll give them that, and stand up for what's right and stop what was happening to their country, or do nothing. That's one of the biggest questions I get. Well, Chris, what if this happens to an independent Alberta? And I fire right back, what if we don't do anything? Mm-hmm. How far are we going to let this go before we stand up and take back control of our sovereignty? And I'll close with this. That word sovereignty, that's what I want for this province. Independence, for me, is a tool by which we accomplish the sovereignty that we need. I wish that we could fix everything, the imbalance, fix the Constitution, fix equalization, all of these things exist within Canada, and then the Canadian flag tattooed on my shoulder would be more appropriate. I really wish it could be like that. But I'm here to tell you, it cannot. It was never meant to be. It cannot be fixed because it's not broken. That leaves us one option. We need to use that tool of independence to claim our sovereignty as Albertans. Not just for us, not just for our kids and our grandkids, although, to be perfectly honest, if I had a choice between saving my kids and letting everyone else burn, you know what I would do. Mm-hmm. We have a duty for the rest of the people in this country who are facing the same problems. Because I'll tell you this from experience as well. When one person or one province stands up and they do what they know is right, they do the hard things. They stand up and they take the rotten tomatoes. They take the handcuffs. They go through the things. Other people will join them. When Alberta becomes an independent nation with a constitution that we write for us, that tells the government what they can do, the other provinces will do the same thing. So don't forget that. We're not abandoning Canada. We're abandoning the notion that we need to destroy everything that made this place great. We're abandoning that, and we're providing the only clear, plausible, and probable path to sovereignty for not just Alberta, but everybody else in this land. Thank you.
Well done.